Inside of the van smelled like leather, gunpowder, and bad decisions. I was currently experiencing all three. My hands were tied. A blindfold covered my eyes. And I had absolutely no idea where I was going. The only thing I knew for sure, at 3 o'clock this morning, my stepfather sold me to the Mafia Queen of Seattle. Hi, my name is Ava Parker, and before you ask, no, I still don't know why. If you're new here, welcome. Grab snacks, subscribe, because if I'm getting kidnapped, you might as well come with me. Now, let's rewind a few hours. At 2:03 a.m., the first thing that woke me wasn't shouting. It was something crashing downstairs, glass. Then another crash. Then my stepfather screaming. I sat straight up in bed, heart pounding. For a moment, I thought someone had broken into the house. Turns out, someone had. Just not the kind of someone who worries about being arrested. I sneaked downstairs and hide behind the television console. I accidentally bumped into a vase. The worst thing I have ever done, because why do I have to be clumsy at this hour? God, I hate myself. One of the bodyguards instantly spotted me before I could think. Who's there? My soul left my body. I bolted, made it exactly 2 steps. A giant hand grabbed the back of my hoodie. Wonderful. Then I was dragged into the living room, forced to kneel beside my embarrassing family. Everyone in Seattle knew who Scarlett King was. She didn't become the Mafia Queen of Seattle without people talking. And trust me, people talked. The woman sitting on our couch wasn't just dangerous. She looked dangerous. Black suit, black gloves, red lipstick, the kind of face that could ruin your life and look pretty doing it. Then Scarlett explains, "Your son stole from me." She looked at my stepbrother, who immediately started crying. Pathetic. $3 million worth of product. The room went silent. Scarlett smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile people see before ending up on documentaries. Now normally, I would remove the problem. My stepbrother started sobbing. I saw my stepfather panic. "Please." My stepfather threw himself forward. "Please don't kill him." Scarlett looked bored. "Then give me one reason." Silence. Then his eyes landed on me, and I knew immediately. I knew, because for the first time in my life, he was looking at me like I was useful. "Take her. That is the moment." Then Scarlett slowly turns. Look up and down. "Your stepdaughter?" "Yes." "You're offering me your daughter to save your son. Please." Then Scarlett walks over, lifts my chin. "Ava Parker." I froze. She knew my name. Wonderful. Even my kidnapper did research. Then Scarlett says something cold. "Your brother steals from me. Your father offers you his payment. And somehow I'm the villain in this conversation." Then, fine. The debt isn't paid. But she'll do. Okay, what is going on here? Am I being treated for a debt? Trust me, I was as confused as you are apparently. To understand how I ended up treated like a piece of unclaimed baggage, you have to look at my stepbrother, Leo. Leo is the kind of guy who thinks he's a criminal mastermind because he successfully snuck a flask into a movie theater once. Turns out Leo had stolen $3 million worth of premium pharmaceutical inventory from the King syndicate. The absolute idiot thought he could sell it online. And just like that, I was traded for a duffel bag of stolen narcotics. The blinding light of a private underground parking garage hits my eyes. Standing in front of me is a woman who looks like she was sculpted from ice and expensive velvet. Scarlett King, the Mafia Queen of Seattle. She looks down at me, her sharp green eyes taking in my oversized pajamas, my messy hair, and the fact that I am completely shivering. I look up at her, blink against the light, and let out a dry breath. "If you're going to execution-style murder me, can we do it inside? It's freezing out here, and my stepbrother isn't worth me catching pneumonia." A tiny, almost invisible smirk tugs at the corner of Scarlett's lips. She steps closer, the scent of expensive dark vanilla and tobacco washing over me. She reaches out, her leather-gloved fingers gently taking my chin, forcing me to look directly into her eyes. "Get your coat, sweetheart. You belong to me now. If you ever find yourself traded to a criminal syndicate at 3 in the morning, here is a helpful tip. Do not expect a welcoming committee." The King estate looked less like a home and more like a fortress designed by a billionaire with a dark soul. High iron gates, cameras that tracked my every breath, and a driveway so long it felt like we were driving into a different zip code. When the car door opened, I was escorted into a foyer with marble floors so shiny I could see my own exhausted, pajama-clad reflection. I stood there, right in the center of the grand hallway, looking like a stray cat that had accidentally wandered into a high-end art gallery. The guards stood in a perfect, intimidating circle around me, their hands resting heavily on their holstered weapons. They expected me to shake. They expected me to drop to my knees and beg for mercy. Instead, I just looked at the massive crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling and wondered how much the electricity bill cost. The heavy click of heels echoed down the grand staircase. Scarlett King descended the steps with a slow, terrifying elegance. She had shed her heavy winter coat. Now, she wore a tailored black silk blouse, her dark hair cascading perfectly over her shoulders. Her sharp eyes locked onto me, tracking the fact that I hadn't moved an inch, nor had I shed a single tear. She stopped right in front of me, crossing her arms. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The guards leaned in, waiting for her command to throw me into a basement cell. "You're remarkably quiet, Ava. Most people in your position are screaming, crying, or bargaining for their lives. Do you not understand who I am?" "Oh, I know exactly who you are, Miss King. You're the woman who currently owns my soul because my stepbrother has the brain capacity of a boiled potato. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics here." Scarlett raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A look of genuine amusement flickered across her cold face. "Logistics? Yes. Like, what's the actual plan here? Do I scrub the marble floors until my fingers bleed? Will I become a getaway driver? Or are you just going to list me on eBay under slightly used bookstore employee to get your $3 million back?" A dead silence fell over the room. I heard one of the guards catch his breath in sheer horror. Nobody spoke to Scarlett King like that. Nobody mocked her operation. For a terrifying 3 seconds, Scarlett just stared at me. Her expression was completely unreadable. Then the corners of her lips twitched. A low, rich laugh vibrated from her chest, a sound that seemed to shock the guards even more than my sarcasm did. "You think I'm going to sell you online?" "Hey, it's a volatile market. I'm just looking for a job description. Your stepfather told me you were quiet, unremarkable, a bookworm who keeps her head down. He omitted the part where you have a death wish and a remarkably sharp tongue. Arthur doesn't notice anything that isn't a gambling table or a bottle of whiskey. He had no idea what Leo was doing, and honestly, neither did I. If I knew my stepbrother was running a black market pharmaceutical empire from his bedroom, I would have charged him rent." Scarlett's laughter faded, replaced by an intense, calculating gaze. She took a step closer, closing the distance between us until I could smell the faint aroma of dark vanilla clinging to her clothes. She looked deep into my eyes, searching for any sign of a lie, any tremor of fear. She found nothing but exhaustion and a heavy dose of reality. She turned to her head enforcer, a towering man who looked like he chewed glass for breakfast. "Prepare the guest suite in the East Wing, the one connected to my private quarters." The enforcer completely froze, his eyes widened. "Ma'am, the East Wing, but that's your secure personal level. Shouldn't we put the collateral in the holding rooms downstairs?" Did I stutter Marcus? Move her belongings or whatever she has to the East Wing? "She stays where I can see her." Marcus bowed his head instantly, his face pale. Scarlett turned her gaze back to me, a small knowing smirk playing on her lips. "You won't be scrubbing floors, Ava, and you certainly won't be sold on eBay. For now, you are my guest. Go get some sleep. We have a lot to discuss tomorrow." As a guard led me up the stairs, I looked back over my shoulder. Scarlett was still standing in the foyer, her green eyes fixed on me, watching my every move. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone was actually looking at me, seeing right through the armor I built. I was in the heart of the most dangerous mafia empire in Seattle, but as I stepped into a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of the guards. I wasn't afraid of the guns. I was afraid of the way my heart skipped a beat when Scarlett King looked at me. When the movies show someone being held hostage by the mafia, the setup is pretty standard. Dark basements, cold concrete floors, a single flickering light bulb, maybe some rusty chains if the budget allows. My current reality: a king-size bed with an 800 thread count Egyptian cotton duvet, a private balcony overlooking the misty Seattle skyline, and a walk-in closet packed entirely with brand new clothes that were, terrifyingly enough, exactly my size. It had been 3 days since my stepfather traded me like a used car, and so far, my captivity felt less like a kidnapping and more like a bizarre, ultra-luxury wellness retreat. Nobody was shouting at me. Nobody was threatening to cut off my fingers. In fact, the terrifying mafia guards who patrolled the hallways wouldn't even make eye contact with me. Every time I walked past them, they stood perfectly straight, looking forward as if looking at me directly might get them fired. Or worse. On the 4th morning, I decided I couldn't take the confusion anymore. I walked down to the massive, hypermodern kitchen. There was a private chef standing near the marble island, meticulously preparing a tray of fresh pastries and hand-whipped vanilla lattes. When he saw me enter, he looked like he had just been caught committing a federal crime. Miss Ava, good morning. I was just about to bring this up to your room. Is there something else you would prefer? I can make anything you desire. Honestly, I just want to know if I'm allowed to use the toaster or if that requires high-level clearance from the boss. Oh, please, use whatever you like. Everything in this house is at your disposal. Boss's strict orders. I frowned, grabbing a warm croissant from the tray. Right. And the strict orders for my execution? When is that scheduled? Just want to make sure I don't book a haircut that day. The chef turned pale, stammering over his words, but before he could answer, a smooth, commanding voice echoed from the doorway. There will be no executions in this house, Ava. Unless, of course, the chef burns my espresso again. I turned around. Scarlett was leaning against the doorframe, holding a tablet in one hand and a dark coat over her arm. She looked impossibly sharp, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that emphasized her powerful posture. But her green eyes weren't on her work. They were fixed entirely on me. She walked over, dismissing the chef with a slight nod of her head. The man practically vanished from the room. I see you found the kitchen. I trust your room is comfortable? Comfortable, Miss King. I am currently living in a space that costs more than my entire genetic line will earn in a lifetime. There are no chains, no locks on my doors. No one is yelling at me. I'm starting to think you run a really incompetent mafia syndicate. Scarlett let out a low, amused hum, pouring herself a cup of black coffee. You think I'm incompetent because I don't mistreat you. I think something is off. I'm collateral for a $3 million debt. My stepbrother is a thief. My stepfather is a coward. Logically, you should be using me to torture them, or using me to get your money back. Instead, you're buying me expensive sweaters and letting your chef bake me pastries. Scarlett didn't answer immediately. She took a slow sip of her coffee, her intense gaze locking onto mine over the rim of the mug. The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. She wasn't just looking at me, she was analyzing me, studying the way I held myself, the defiance in my eyes, the way I refused to back down even though she held all the power. She stepped closer, the familiar, intoxicating scent of dark vanilla and rain swirling around her. She reached out, her fingers hovering just an inch away from my cheek before she dropped her hand back to her side. Perhaps I simply recognized the value of keeping my assets safe, Ava. Your family's debts are their own problem. You are here with me. That's a non-answer, Miss King. You're studying me, like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve. And what if you are? What if I find you to be the most interesting thing to happen to Seattle in a very long time? My heart did a dangerous, violent flip against my ribs. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my dry humor intact to hide the sudden heat blooming in my face. Well, if you're looking for a thrill, I can show you how I alphabetize the fiction section. It's truly wild stuff. Scarlett smiled, a genuine soft smile that entirely transformed her cold face. She looked at me for a few more seconds, her eyes lingering on mine with a strange, deep emotion I couldn't quite identify. It wasn't pity, it wasn't anger. It felt almost like recognition, like she had been waiting for me. Eat your breakfast, Ava. I have business to attend to, but don't think you've escaped my gaze. I see everything. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her coat billowing behind her. I stood there, holding my half-eaten croissant, my mind spinning. Something was definitely off. Scarlett King wasn't treating me like a prisoner. She was treating me like something precious, and the absolute mystery of why she was doing it was starting to make me completely obsessed. The problem with a golden cage is that no matter how shiny the bars are, It's still a cage. By day 5, the luxury of the King estate wasn't comforting anymore, it was suffocating. Every beautiful dress in that closet felt like a uniform. Every perfect meal felt like a bribe. And the way Scarlett King looked at me, it was short-circuiting my brain. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't read. I kept overanalyzing every single word she said to me in the kitchen. What if I find you to be the most interesting thing to happen to Seattle in a very long time? It was a line straight out of the romance novels I sold at the bookstore, but this wasn't a book. This was real life, and Scarlett was a woman who ordered executions for breakfast. I needed to snap out of it. I needed to remind myself who she was, and more importantly, I needed to see what would actually happen if I tried to leave. I needed to find out if the velvet gloves would finally come off. At 1 a.m., the mansion was completely silent. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take any of the expensive clothes Scarlett bought me. I just put on my original, slightly frayed oversized sweater, my worn-out sneakers, and slipped out of the guest suite. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, a cold sweat breaking out across my neck as I navigated the shadowy marble hallways. I knew the front entrance was heavily guarded, but yesterday, while wandering the grounds, I noticed a side glass door near the conservatory that led to the western gardens. The lock was entirely electronic, but I had watched a guard punch in the code earlier that afternoon. 0419. My fingers trembled as I pressed the glowing numbers. Beep, 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 beep. A soft mechanical click echoed through the dark room. The heavy glass door slid open, letting in a rush of freezing, damp Seattle night air. I didn't look back. I slipped through the opening, my sneakers hitting the wet gravel as I sprinted into the darkness of the estate's massive gardens. The perimeter wall was only about 50 yards away. If I could just reach the tree line. The temperature has dropped to 2 degrees tonight, Ava. You're going to catch a severe cold in that sweater. I completely froze. My boots skidded on the wet gravel. Stepping out from the shadow of a massive stone archway was Scarlett. She didn't have her usual army of guards with her. She was entirely alone. She wore silk black pajamas, her hands casually tucked into her pockets. She wasn't holding a weapon. She didn't look angry. She just looked incredibly calm, her sharp green eyes cutting through the darkness, locking directly onto me. I told you before, sweetheart. I see everything in this house. The moment your bare feet touched the floorboards of your bedroom at 1 a.m, my security team alerted me. I've been standing out here waiting for you for 10 minutes. A wave of hot, suffocating frustration rushed through my chest. The dry, sarcastic armor I usually wore completely cracked. I didn't want to make a joke. I didn't want to be funny. I was suddenly so incredibly angry that my voice shook. Are you kidding me? Is this a joke to you? A little game to keep you entertained between running your cartel. Let me go, Scarlett. Just let me leave. Scarlett's calm demeanor didn't waver. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, her leather boots crunching heavily on the gravel. And go where, Ava? Back to the stepfather who traded you like an unwanted piece of property to save his own skin? Back to the stepbrother who would sell your soul again the next time he runs out of money? You have no one out there. That is my choice to make. My terrible, messy, miserable life belongs to me. I would rather sleep on the floor of my bookstore and eat instant ramen every single night than be your pretty little prisoner. I am not your property. I am not yours. I shouted the last words so loudly my throat hurt, the sound echoing off the stone walls of the mansion. For the first time since I met her, Scarlett's calm expression shattered. A flash of dark, raw emotion crossed her face. She closed the distance between us in 3 long, predatory strides, stopping so close to me that I could feel the intense, radiating heat of her body cutting through the freezing night air. She reached out, her hands gripping my shoulders. Her grip wasn't painful, but it was completely unyielding, holding me firmly in place. Then stop acting like everyone wants to own you. I stopped breathing. The entire world seemed to go dead silent. I stared up at her, my eyes wide, my heart violently slamming against my ribs. Scarlett's chest was heaving, her green eyes dark and swirling with an intensity that completely terrified me. Her hands on my shoulders softened, her thumbs gently brushing against the fabric of my sweater. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, rougher, carrying a strange heavy weight that made my knees feel weak. You think I look at you and see collateral? You think I look at you and see a hostage? Your stepfather didn't give you to me, Ava. He abandoned you. And the moment he threw you away, I took you out of that toxic house because you deserve 1,000 times better than the life they gave you. Why? Why do you care? My voice was barely a whisper now, the anger completely draining out of me, replaced by a deep, terrifying confusion. Scarlett didn't answer. She just looked down at me, her eyes dropping to my lips for a fraction of a second before snapping back to mine. The tension between us was so thick, so heavy with unspoken things, that it felt like the air itself was vibrating. She let go of my shoulders, her hands slowly moving up to gently cup the side of my face. Her leather glove was cold against my skin, but her touch was incredibly tender. Because you are the only real untouched thing in my entire world, Ava, and I am not going to let them destroy you. She dropped her hand, stepping back into the shadows, leaving me standing in the freezing cold. Go back inside, Ava, before you freeze. She turned and walked back toward the mansion, her long coat trailing behind her. I stood alone in the dark garden, my fingers touching the spot on my cheek where her hand had just been. My mind was completely racing, and my heart wouldn't stop pounding. She hadn't forced me back inside. She hadn't threatened me. But as I slowly walked back through the glass door, I realized the absolute worst part of this entire night. I didn't want to run away anymore. It turns out that the most dangerous place to be isn't locked in a prison cell, it's locked inside your own mind. For 48 hours after our midnight confrontation in the garden, I barely saw Scarlett. She vanished into the shadows of her criminal empire, leaving me alone with the echoing silence of the East Wing and a million unanswered questions. Her words kept repeating in my head like a broken record. The moment he threw you away, I took you out of that toxic house. You are the only real, untouched thing in my entire world. It didn't make any sense. Why would have feared Mafia Dawn, a woman who controlled the entire Pacific Northwest underworld, care about a random, introverted bookstore employee? Why me? There had to be a catch. There had to be a hidden angle I wasn't seeing. I refused to let my foolish heart believe that a dangerous woman like Scarlett King was just acting out of the goodness of her heart. So, I decided to do what I do best, research. At 2 p.m., while the mansion staff was busy prepping for an evening gala, I slipped down to the ground floor. I avoided the main hallways and navigated toward the West Wing, the administrative heart of the estate where Scarlett kept her private office. The mahogany double doors were usually flanked by heavily armed guards, but today was completely empty. The door was cracked open just a tiny fraction, a warm sliver of light spilling out onto the polished floorboards. I held my breath, pressing my back against the wall next to the door. Just as I raised my hand to peek through the gap, I heard voices inside, heavy, serious, and tense. Boss, with all due respect, the syndicates council is starting to ask questions. They know Ava Parker stole $3 million worth of product. They want his head on a spike. Instead, you let the stepfather walk away scot-free, and you're keeping his stepsister in the main wing like royalty. The other families think you're getting soft. I held my breath, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. They were talking about me. I strained my ears, waiting for Scarlett's cold, calculated response. I expected her to say I was a bargaining chip, or that she had a plan to use me to crush my family. Instead, there was a long, terrifying pause, followed by the distinct sound of Scarlett pouring a glass of whiskey. Let them think whatever they want, Marcus. I don't care about the council, and I give even less of a care about the $3 million Leo stole. That money was entirely irrelevant. Irrelevant? Boss, $3 million is a massive hit to our pharmaceutical distribution. Marcus, look at me. Even through the thick wooden door, the sheer authority in Scarlett's voice made a cold shiver run down my spine. The room went completely silent. Do you honestly believe I didn't know Leo was skimming from our inventory? I've had eyes on that pathetic family for 5 years. I knew exactly when he stole the product. I knew exactly how much he took, and I knew the exact moment his idiotic stepfather would run out of options. I engineered that raid. I forced Arthur's hand. My hands began to shake. I pressed my knuckles against my mouth to stop myself from gasping out loud. She engineered the raid? She wanted this to happen. I don't understand, boss. Why go through all that trouble? Why do you care so much about a completely ordinary girl from a bookstore? Because she isn't just a girl from a bookstore, Marcus. She is her daughter, and I swore an oath a long time ago that I would pull her out of that burning house no matter what it took. I didn't take Ava as collateral for a crime. I used her brother's stupidity as the perfect excuse to finally bring her home, where she belongs, where she is safe. But have you told her the truth about her mother, about why you? And she can never find out. If Ava knew the real reason she's here, she would hate me forever. She would think of me as a monster who manipulated her entire life. She must believe this was all a coincidence. Now, clear the council's doubts, Marcus. Tell them the Parker debt is settled in full. By me. The debt is settled. My mind is completely fractured. The walls of the hallway seem to tilt around me. My mother? What did my late mother have to do with the Mafia Queen of Seattle? My mother was a gentle, quiet nurse who passed away years ago. How could she possibly be linked to a woman like Scarlett King? Before I could process the sheer weight of the mystery, I heard heavy footsteps moving toward the office door. Panic seized my chest. I stumbled backward, my sneakers squeaking slightly on the floor. I turned and sprinted down the hallway as silently as possible, ducking behind a massive marble pillar just as the office door swung wide open. Marcus walked past my hiding spot, his expression grim and focused. A moment later, Scarlett stepped out into the hallway. She stopped, her sharp green eyes scanning the empty corridor. For a terrifying second, her gaze landed directly on the pillar I was hiding behind. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my body flat against the cold stone, my heart beating so loudly I was certain she could hear it. After what felt like an eternity, her footsteps faded away down the opposite hall. I slumped against the pillar, sliding down to the floor, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Scarlett hadn't kidnapped me. She had hunted me. She had watched my family for years, waiting for the perfect moment to trap me in this luxurious cage. It was a massive, calculated lie. Everything between us, the chemistry, the late-night conversation in the garden, the beautiful clothes, it was all built on a massive hidden past that I knew absolutely nothing about. I looked down at my trembling hands, a dangerous mixture of anger, confusion, and an intense burning curiosity washing over me. She wanted a mystery? Fine, but I was going to find out exactly what secret Scarlett King was hiding from me, even if it destroyed us both. If you're enjoying Ava and Scarlett's story so far, don't forget to like and please subscribe, my darlings. Also, hit that notification bell. Leave a comment below letting me know what you think Scarlett's big secret is. I read all of your theories. Now let's get right back into the story. They say information is power, but right now the secret I was carrying felt like a loaded weapon with the safety off. For the past 24 hours, every time I looked at Scarlett King, I didn't just see a terrifying mafia boss. I saw a master manipulator who had been watching my life from the shadows for 5 entire years. She had engineered the raid on my house. She had bought my freedom before I even knew I lost it. And the worst part, looking at her still made my heart do a dangerous, erratic dance inside my chest. I was furious. I was confused. And more than anything, I was completely obsessed with finding out why my late mother was tied to the underground Queen of Seattle. But before I could investigate any further, Scarlett disrupted my entire world yet again. "Pack a small bag, Ava," she had told me that morning, her voice smooth and leaving absolutely zero room for argument. "We are going to Portland for a high-level business summit. You're coming with me." When I asked her why a billionaire mafia queen needed a bookstore employee at a criminal summit, she simply smirked and said, "Because you keep me grounded, sweetheart, and I like having beautiful things next to me when I deal with ugly people." Now we were sitting in the back of a luxury armored SUV speeding down the rain-slicked highway toward Oregon. The silence between us was heavy, charged with a strange new electricity. Scarlett was focused on her tablet, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, making her look impossibly sophisticated and deadly all at once. I sat pressed against the opposite door, staring at her side profile, trying to read the enigma that she was. You know, normally when people take someone hostage, they don't drag them along on business trips. Are you trying to get a tax write-off from me, or is this just your way of making sure I don't reorganize your kitchen cabinets while you're gone? Scarlett didn't look up from her tablet, but a tiny, familiar smirk touched her lips. I told you, Ava, you aren't a hostage, and considering how much you complained about the lack of oat milk on day 2, I shudder to think what you'd do to my kitchen if left unsupervised for 48 hours. It's a valid dietary preference, Miss King, but seriously, why am I here? What's the real angle? Scarlett finally clicked off her tablet, removing her glasses as she turned her full, undivided attention toward me. Those sharp green eyes seemed to read every hidden thought in my mind. She slid closer across the leather seat, closing the distance between us until I could smell the faint scent of rain and dark vanilla clinging to her jacket. The real angle is that a rival family in Portland has been attempting to encroach on our southern shipping routes. I am putting an end to it tonight. And I am keeping you by my side because the safest place for you in the entire country is within arm's reach of me. The safest place. I swallowed hard, the word hitting differently now that I knew she had been protecting me for years. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand to know the truth about my mother. But before I could open my mouth, the SUV came to a smooth halt in front of a towering, ultra-exclusive 5-star boutique hotel in downtown Portland. Marcus, the head enforcer, opened our door, his face unusually tense as he scanned the crowded street. He escorted us quickly through the lobby, bypassing the front desk entirely and leading us straight up to the penthouse level via a private elevator. But the moment Marcus unlocked the heavy double doors to the suite, he froze. He looked at the paperwork in his hand, then turned to Scarlett with a look of pure dread. Boss, we have a massive problem, explained Marcus. I don't tolerate mistakes on summit nights. The rival syndicate, they booked out the entire top 3 floors of the hotel under a shell company to restrict our security team. My men had to fight tooth and nail just to keep this level secure. But because of the reservation lockdown, there was a clerical error at the front desk. I stepped up next to Scarlett, looking past Marcus into the grand, opulent penthouse. It was stunning. Marble features, a private fireplace, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. But as my eyes scanned the massive room, my jaw slowly dropped. There was only one bed, a single, massive, king-size bed draped in silk sheets, sitting right in the center of the master open-plan suite. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. This is a joke. Are we living in a cliché internet romance novel right now? Marcus, where is the second room? There isn't one, Miss Ava. The entire hotel is completely booked. Changing rooms or moving to a different hotel right now would expose the boss to an ambush on open streets. Every single enforcer we have is stationed in the hallway and the stairwells. For security reasons, you two have to stay in this suite, together. I turned around to look at Scarlett, expecting her to be furious, or at least slightly annoyed by the massive security breach. Instead, Scarlett was completely calm. She casually unbuttoned her heavy wool coat, handing it to Marcus without ever taking her eyes off me. A dark, deeply amused glint danced in her green eyes as she took a slow step toward me, towering over my shorter frame. Thank you, Marcus. Secure the perimeter. No one enters this floor without my direct clearance. Yes, boss. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind us, leaving the two of us completely alone in the silent, dimly lit penthouse. The tension in the air was suddenly suffocating. So, one bed, the literal definition of forced proximity. Do you want the left side, or should we draw a line down the middle with pillows like we're in a bad sitcom? You can have the bed, Ava. I will take the armchair by the fireplace. I don't sleep much on summit nights anyway. Right. Because a feared Mafia Queen sleeping in an armchair is totally normal. Just admit it, Scarlett, you're enjoying this. You engineered this entire trip just to keep me trapped in a room with you. I meant it as a sarcastic joke, but the moment the word engineered left my mouth, Scarlett's entire demeanor changed. The amusement vanished from her eyes, replaced by a sudden intense seriousness. She closed the distance between us in 2 swift, silent strides, pinning me firmly between her powerful body and the heavy glass window overlooking the rainy city. She leaned down, her breath hot against my ear, her hand coming up to rest on the glass right next to my head. You think I play games with your safety, Ava? You think I brought you here for my own amusement? I think you hide things from me, Scarlett. I think you've been hiding things from the very first night you took me. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the slight flare of her nostrils, the dark ring around her green irises, the absolute intensity of her gaze. My heart was pounding so loudly against my ribs, I was certain she could hear it. For a fraction of a second, Scarlett's eyes dropped down to my lips, her posture shifting, leaning in closer, gravitating toward me as if drawn by an undeniable force. The air between us felt like a lit match, seconds away from a massive explosion. It was the closest we had ever been to a real, breathless kiss. But just as my eyes fluttered shut, expecting the touch of her lips, a sniper bullet tore through the penthouse. Before I could even scream, Scarlett's mafia reflexes took over. She grabbed me by the waist, tackling my body brutally to the floor, using her own back as a human shield as a second bullet whistled directly over our heads. People always talk about time slowing down during a crisis. They lie. Time doesn't slow down. It blurs into a chaotic, terrifying mess of sensory overload. 1 second I was looking into Scarlett's intense green eyes, feeling the heat of her skin inches from mine. The next, the world exploded into a shower of sharp, biting glass fragments. The deafening roar of a high-caliber sniper rifle echoed through the room, followed immediately by the brutal weight of Scarlett tackling me to the hardwood floor. She rolled instantly, pulling my body completely underneath hers, pinning me flat against the ground. She was using her own back, her own life, as a shield to protect me from the window. Another bullet hissed directly over our heads, embedding itself into the mahogany doorframe with a sickening thud. The smell of ozone and crushed plaster filled the air. "Scarlett! Stay down, do not move, Ava, don't you dare look up!" Her voice wasn't the calm, cool, authoritative tone I was used to. It was raw. It was frantic. Her hands were trembling slightly as she gripped the sides of my face, pressing me flat against the floor. For the first time since the night I was taken, I didn't see a calculating mafia don. I saw a woman who looked genuinely, deeply terrified. And she wasn't terrified of the sniper. She was terrified of what the sniper might do to me. The heavy penthouse doors burst open. Marcus and a dozen heavily armed enforcers rushed into the room, their weapons raised as they formed a physical wall between us and the shattered window. "Boss, we have the trajectory. South Tower, 400 yards out. My team is moving to eliminate the shooter right now. We need to get you out of here." "Secure the freight elevator. We are leaving now." Scarlett gritted her teeth, pushing herself up from the floor. She grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet in one swift motion. But the moment she stood up, she stumbled slightly, her left hand instinctively snapping back to clutch her right side. My eyes dropped down to her waist. The tailored charcoal fabric of her suit jacket was already soaked in a dark, rapidly spreading stain of crimson blood. A piece of flying glass, or perhaps a grazing bullet, had torn right through her side. "Scarlett, you're bleeding, you're hurt. It's a scratch, Ava, move." She didn't give me a choice. She kept her grip locked onto my hand, pulling me down the dimly lit hallway toward the secure back exit of the hotel. Her grip was so tight it almost hurt, but I didn't care. My chest felt tight, a suffocating wave of panic washing over me that had absolutely nothing to do with my own safety. She took a bullet for me. The realization echoed in my brain, shattering every cynical thought I had left. A woman who engineered a raid to steal me away had just willingly offered up her own body to keep me breathing. The trip back to Seattle was a blur of high-speed armored vehicles and tense whispered radio chatter. By the time we arrived back at the King estate, it was 5 a.m. The mansion was in a state of high alert. A private syndicate doctor was already waiting in the East Wing, rushing Scarlett into her private quarters while Marcus gently but firmly blocked me from entering. "Miss Ava, please. Let the medical team do their work. You need to rest." "Ava, I'm not going anywhere, Marcus. I'm staying right here." Marcus looked down at me, his gaze softening just a fraction. He saw the dried blood on my sweater, Scarlett's blood. He saw the absolute defiance in my eyes. After a long pause, he slowly stepped aside, bowing his head. "She kept you safe. That's all that matters to her. Don't let her see you crying, Miss Ava. She hates when people look at her like she's vulnerable. I'm not crying, Marcus. I'm just furious that she won't let me yell at her for being an idiot. 2 hours later, the doctor finally stepped out of the room, giving me a silent nod. I quietly pushed the heavy bedroom door open. The spacious room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight against the morning sun. Scarlett was sitting up in her massive bed, her white button-down shirt completely open, revealing a thick white layer of medical bandages wrapped tightly around her ribs. She looked exhausted, pale, but the moment she heard the door click, her head snapped up. When she saw it was me, the tense line of her shoulders visibly relaxed. You're supposed to be sleeping, Ava. And you're supposed to be an untouchable mafia queen, yet here you are, looking like an extra in a medical drama. I walked over to the side of the bed, my dry humor failing to hide the slight tremor in my voice. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, looking at the white bandages. Scarlett watched me closely, her expression completely unreadable as I reached out, my fingers hovering just above the gauze before I pulled away. Why did you do that? You could have died, Scarlett. You're the boss. Your life is worth millions. Mine is worth a textbook collection and a bookstore salary. Scarlett reached out, her warm, bare hand covering mine, stopping me from pulling away. She squeezed my fingers, forcing me to look up into her intense green eyes. There was no mockery in her face, no arrogance, just a deep, raw sincerity that made my breath hitch. I told you before, Ava, you are the only real, untouched thing in my world. Your life is worth everything to me. If a bullet takes me out, the syndicate survives. But if something happens to you... She paused, her voice dropping to a rough, quiet whisper that sent a shiver straight down my spine. If something happens to you, Ava, there's no point to any of this. I stared at her, the final pieces of my emotional walls completely crumbling to dust. I didn't care about the secrets anymore. I didn't care about the danger. As I sat beside her bed, holding her hand in the quiet morning light, I realized the terrifying truth. I was completely, utterly falling for my captor. And there was absolutely no turning back. There is a specific kind of madness that takes over when you realize you are falling for someone you shouldn't. It's a slow-burning heat that starts in your chest and radiates through your veins until every single thought, every breath, and every heartbeat centers around them. 2 weeks had passed since the shooting in Portland. Scarlett's wound was healing perfectly, leaving behind a faint silver scar against her sun-kissed skin, a permanent reminder that she'd offered up her body to keep me breathing. And since that night, the invisible walls between us hadn't just cracked. They had completely vanished. The cold, terrifying Mafia Queen of Seattle had transformed into something infinitely more dangerous, a woman completely determined to possess my heart. It started with small things. The way her hand would casually rest on the small of my back whenever we walked through the estate, her palm warm and sending a jolt of pure electricity straight up my spine. The way her eyes would darken, turning a deep, stormy forest green whenever I walked into the room wearing one of the silk dresses she bought me. She didn't just look at me anymore, she devoured me with her gaze. Then came tonight. "Dress up, sweetheart," Scarlett had murmured against my ear after dinner, her voice a low, gravelly vibration that made my knees instantly weak. "I have a surprise for you." Now, we were standing on the rooftop of a soaring skyscraper in the heart of downtown Seattle. The entire roof had been completely cleared out. No public, no distractions, just a small candlelit table and an ocean of twinkling city lights stretching out into the dark horizon. The cool night air brushed against my bare shoulders, but I wasn't cold. Not even a little bit, because Scarlett was standing right behind me. I felt the heat of her chest press lightly against my back before I even heard her footsteps. She reached around me, her long, elegant fingers gently clasping a heavy white gold necklace around my throat. Her knuckles brushed against the sensitive skin of my neck, and a helpless shiver rippled through my entire body. "Do you like the view, Ava?" Her voice was right next to my ear, her warm breath fanning across my cheek. I swallowed hard, turning around slowly within the small space between her arms. Scarlett had shed her usual corporate suits. Tonight, she wore an incredibly sharp, tailored velvet blazer over a silk camisole, her hair falling in soft waves around her face. She looked impossibly beautiful, dangerous, and completely captivating. The view of the city is beautiful, Scarlett, but I think you're just showing off your real estate portfolio at this point. Scarlett let out a low, husky laugh that vibrated directly into my chest. She stepped even closer, completely closing the distance between us until the fabric of our clothes brushed together. Her sharp gaze dropped to my lips, lingering there for a long, heavy second before snapping back to my eyes. I'm not looking at the city, Ava. I haven't looked at the city once since you got here. My breath hitched. The air between us was suddenly thick with an intoxicating, suffocating heat. Scarlett reached out, her thumb gently tracing the line of my jaw, her fingers sliding back into my hair, tilting my head up slightly so I had no choice but to look at her. Her touch was possessive yet incredibly tender. You spent your whole life in that bookstore reading about epic, consuming loves, didn't you? Tell me, Ava, does this feel like one of your stories? My stories usually don't involve sniper rifles and bullet wounds. No. They involve women who would burn a whole city to the ground just to see you smile, and right now, I am very close to lighting the match. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. The intensity in her eyes was scorching. She leaned down slowly, her lips hovering just millimeters away from mine. I could smell the familiar, addictive aroma of dark vanilla and expensive tobacco clinging to her. Every nerve ending in my body screamed for her to close the gap. I gripped the lapels of her blazer, pulling her closer, my eyes fluttering shut as our breaths mingled in the dark night. We were so close I could feel the faint, electric static between our lips. A second away from a breathless, ruinous collision. But just as the tips of our noses brushed, Scarlett suddenly stopped. A sharp, ragged breath left her lips. She pressed her forehead gently against mine, her eyes closing tight as her grip on my waist tightened almost painfully. She was fighting herself, restraining the sheer, overwhelming hunger rolling off her in waves. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice rough, strained with an intense effort. Scarlett rested her forehead against mine. For the first time since I'd met her, the woman who terrified half of Seattle looked uncertain. Not afraid, just careful, like one wrong move might break something she cared about. Ava. The way she said my name made it sound important. I looked up. "What?" Her hand tightened around mine. "Do you know how many people spend time around me because they want something?" I smiled. "I'm guessing that's a trick question. I'm serious." That made me pay attention. Scarlett looked out at the city for a moment before continuing. "Money, favors, protection, connections." Then her eyes found mine again. "You don't want any of that." I wasn't sure what to say, because she was right. The private jets were nice, the penthouse was nice, the designer clothes were nice. But if Scarlett King suddenly lost every dollar she owned tomorrow, I'd still be standing here, and somehow she seemed to know it. "I don't want gratitude, Ava." Her voice had gone quieter. "I don't want you choosing me because I got shot." A nervous laugh escaped me. "That would be a terrible reason." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Exactly." She stepped closer, close enough that I could count the tiny freckles hidden beneath her makeup. Close enough that I forgot what point I was trying to make. "I want you to choose me when this is boring." I blinked. "What?" "When we're arguing over what movie to watch." I laughed. Scarlett continued. "When I leave coffee cups everywhere." "You absolutely leave coffee cups everywhere." "I do." "When we're both exhausted." Her gaze softened. "When it's just life." Something shifted inside me, because suddenly this wasn't about mafia empires, or private security, or danger. She wasn't talking about passion, she was talking about forever, and somehow that was far more terrifying. "Ava, yeah, when I finally kiss you. I want there to be no doubt that you chose me too, and just like that." Her thumb gently brushing across my bottom lip, leaving it tingling and burning for her to H. I stared up at her, completely breathless, my mind spinning into pure chaos. She wasn't just a mafia queen taking what she wanted. She was a woman completely undone by her feelings for me. And as we stood under the Seattle skyline, bathed in the glow of 1,000 lights, I realized the absolute truth. I didn't just want her to kiss me. I wanted to belong to her. I forgot what the Seattle skyline looked like. There is a distinct difference between reading a mystery novel and actually living inside one. In a book, you can always flip to the final page when the suspense becomes too much to bear. But in real life, when you pull on a loose thread, you have to be prepared for the entire world to unravel right in front of you. The memory of Scarlett on that rooftop, the intense heat of her body, the raw hunger in her green eyes, and the desperate restraint in her voice had completely consumed me. But as deeply as I was falling for her, the heavy weight of her secret was still suffocating me. I refused to let my foolish heart believe that a dangerous woman like Scarlett King was just acting out of the goodness of her heart. There had to be a catch. The opportunity to find it arrived 2 days later. Scarlett was pulled away to an emergency cartel meeting downtown, taking Marcus and the primary security detail with her. The East Wing was entirely quiet. I bypassed the main administrative rooms and headed straight for the mansion's private library. I knew Scarlett spent her rare free hours in there. If she kept anything personal, it would be hidden among the pages. After an hour of searching different books, my eyes landed on a heavy, antique safe built into the lower wooden paneling behind the main desk. It didn't have an electronic panel. It was a classic heavy silver dial. I knelt on the cold floor, my fingers trembling as I gripped the cold metal. First, I tried my mother's birthday. I spun the dial, holding my breath as I pulled the handle. Nothing. It didn't budge. Next, I tried Scarlett's birthday date I had read about in the old news clippings. I cleared the lock, spun the numbers carefully, and pulled again. Still, the safe remained stubbornly locked. I sat back on my heels, frustration burning in my chest. Scarlett didn't think like a normal criminal. She didn't use obvious dates. Then, it clicked. I remembered the security code she had used for the conservatory door on the night I tried to run. Over. 4. 1. 9. April 19th. I cleared the dial one last time. Left to 0, right to 4, left to 1, right to 9. A heavy mechanical click echoed through the quiet room. The iron door swung open with a low groan. My breath caught in my throat. There were no stacks of illicit money inside. There were no weapons. There was only a single faded leather journal, and tucked inside its cover was an old, wrinkled photograph. I pulled the photograph out, my hand shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. I had spent years missing my mother. Then suddenly she was standing right in front of me, 15 years younger, frozen inside a photograph. She was wearing her old hospital nurse uniform I remembered from old family albums. Her face soft, smiling gently down at a young, traumatized girl she was treating in the back of an ambulance. That girl, covered in soot and cuts, was unmistakably a 16-year-old Scarlett King. The parallel hit me like a physical blow. 15 years ago, my mother had been a nurse healing a broken, injured Scarlett. And just last week, I had been sitting by a medical bed, cleaning the wound of that very same woman. With a racing heart, I flipped the photograph over. Written on the back in elegant dark ink was Scarlett's handwriting. Seattle General Hospital. The 14th of May. The night the syndicate burned my childhood home to the ground. The night Ava Parker risked her own life to pull me out of the flames when everyone else left me to die. I survived because of her. I will find her daughter. I will protect her. I swear it on my life. A hot, stinging tear spilled over my eyelashes, dropping onto the photo. Scarlett hadn't engineered the raid to trap me. She had been tracking my family, waiting for the exact moment Arthur tried to destroy me, so she could step in and pull me out of the flames. Just like my mother had done for her. You weren't supposed to find that, Ava. I gasped, spinning around on the floor, clutching the photograph tightly against my chest. Scarlett was standing in the doorway of the library, completely alone. Her long black coat hung open. Her face was deathly pale. For the first time since I met her, the untouchable Dawn looked completely exposed. Ava, please, Scarlett said, her voice dropping to a rough, strained whisper as she took a slow, hesitant step into the room. Let me explain. You've been watching me for 5 years? My voice cracked, thick with emotion. I stood up slowly, holding out the faded photograph toward her. All this time, I thought I was just a piece of unlucky collateral. I thought I was just a random girl caught in a bad situation. But you knew exactly who I was from the very first second. Yes, Scarlett whispered, her green eyes wide with a rare, agonizing vulnerability. I knew exactly who you were. Your mother was the only person in this city who showed me mercy when I was an orphan with nothing. After she died, I tried finding you. A small smile touched her lips. Not a happy one, the kind people wear when they're remembering something difficult. Do you know how many Ava Parkers live in Washington? I blinked. What? 412. That caught me completely off guard. I counted. Of course she counted. She was a mafia queen. Naturally, she turned grief into research. I looked for years. She took another step closer. When I finally found you, I told myself I was keeping a promise. I couldn't sit by and watch them break you. I settle my debts, Ava. Always. So this whole thing. I stepped back, the painful ache of my deepest, oldest wound airing wide open in my chest. This beautiful room, the clothes, the rooftop, it's all just a debt to you. You're just paying back a favor to a dead nurse? Scarlett closed the distance between us in 3 blurred, desperate strides. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed my wrists, her grip intense, her green eyes blazing with a fierce, burning passion that completely shattered the quiet of the library. Don't you dare say that, Ava. Scarlett commanded, her chest heaving heavily against mine, her face inches from my own. Then what is it, Scarlett? Tell me. At first, yes, it was a debt. It was an oath to keep you safe from harm, Scarlett confessed, her voice dropping to a fierce, trembling whisper that scorched my very soul. For 5 years, I was looking for Elena Parker's daughter. Then I met you, and suddenly, finding you became the easiest part. I told myself I was protecting a promise, Ava, but somewhere along the way, I started protecting you. She leaned down further, her forehead resting gently against mine, her breath hot against my lips. Her hands moved from my wrist to softly cup my face, her thumbs wiping away the tears on my cheeks. The debt ended a long time ago, Ava, Scarlett whispered, her voice completely breaking with a raw, undeniable devotion. You didn't. I stared up at her, the final pieces of my emotional walls completely crumbling to dust. I didn't care about the secrets anymore. I didn't care about the danger. As I stood in her embrace, looking into the eyes of the woman who had spent years searching for me, I realized the terrifying, beautiful truth. I was completely, utterly falling for this woman, gosh. And there was absolutely no turning back. If this emotional roller coaster has you hooked, please, my darlings, take a quick second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep creating these premium, high-retention stories for you. Drop a comment letting me know, would you forgive Scarlett for keeping such a massive secret? Let me know, and let's jump right back into the drama. Truth has a funny way of shifting the ground beneath your feet. After Scarlett's fierce confession in the library, everything changed. The heavy weight of the past didn't separate us, it bonded us. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an afterthought. I felt fiercely, passionately chosen. But just as I was letting my guard down, allowing myself to believe that a future with Scarlett was possible, the ghosts of my old life crawled out of the woodwork. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 days after the library reveal. Scarlett was downstairs in a high-security briefing, leaving me to read by the fireplace in the East Wing living room. The quiet was shattered when the heavy oak doors swung open. I expected to see Marcus or one of the usual maid staff. Instead, my blood instantly turned to ice. Standing in the doorway, soaked from the Seattle rain and looking incredibly disheveled, was my stepfather, Arthur. Arthur, how did you get in here? I stood up slowly, my hands clenching into tight fists at my sides. A heavy wave of disgust washed over me just looking at his face. This was the man who had dragged me out of bed at 3 a.m. to do house chores and also traded me away like currency. Arthur held up his hands defensively, a pathetic, slimy smile stretching across his face as he stepped into the luxurious room, his muddy boots ruining the pristine rugs. Ava, my beautiful girl, thank God you're safe, Arthur said. I've been trying to find a way past the perimeter guards for days. I had to bribe a delivery driver just to slip into the back courtyard. Get out, Arthur. Turn around and walk out before I call the guards and have you thrown off the balcony. You don't belong here. Now, hold on a minute, Ava. Is that any way to speak to the man who raised you? Look at you. Look at this place. You're living like a literal princess. The expensive silk dresses, the jewelry. I always knew you were special. You didn't think I was special when you threw me in the back of a cargo van to pay off Leo's gambling debts. You used me as a human shield. Arthur's slimy smile vanished, replaced by a calculating, desperate glint in his eyes. He took a step closer to me, lowering his voice to an urgent whisper. I did what I had to do to save Leo's life, Ava. But that doesn't matter anymore, because I know the truth. I found your mother's old medical logs in the attic last night. I know exactly what happened 15 years ago at Seattle General Hospital. I know Elena saved the big boss's life when she was just a kid. And I know that the only reason Scarlett King didn't slaughter our entire family for Leo's theft is because of you. She's obsessed with you, Ava. You have the most powerful woman in the Pacific Northwest wrapped around your little finger. If you know the truth, then you know you should be terrified of her. Scarlett will destroy you if you touch a single hair on my head. Oh, I'm not going to touch you, sweetheart, but we are going to use this. You and me. Think about it. All you have to do is ask her for a small favor, a $10 million gift to help your old stepfather clear his remaining debts in Vegas. If you do that, I'll take Leo, we'll leave the country, and we will never bother you again. And if I say no, Arthur's face contorted into something incredibly ugly and cruel. The pathetic act completely dropped. If you say no, I take these medical records and the story of your mother's connection to the King syndicate straight to the federal prosecutors and the rival mafia families. I will blow Scarlett King's entire operation wide open. I will make sure the syndicate council finds out that their fierce queen is harboring the daughter of a woman who crossed the old cartel. If you don't get me that money, Ava, I will make sure your precious Mafia Queen loses her throne, or her life. A white-hot fury exploded in my chest. I had spent years letting this man walk all over me, letting him make me feel small. But he wasn't just threatening me anymore. He was threatening Scarlett. I took a step forward, my chin lifted, my voice dripping with pure venom. You really are a special kind of idiot, aren't you, Arthur? What did you say to me? You think you're a mastermind, but you just walked into the most secure fortress in Seattle to threaten the most dangerous woman alive. You didn't find a loophole, Arthur. You just walked straight into your own execution. You wouldn't dare. She won't have to. The freezing, authoritative voice cut through the room like a physical blade. Arthur violently gasped, spinning around. Scarlett King was standing in the doorway. She was flanked by Marcus and 4 massive enforcers, all of them holding suppressed firearms. Scarlett's face was a mask of absolute, unadulterated fury. Her green eyes were completely dark, practically glowing with a deadly intent. She slowly unbuttoned her suit jacket, looking at my stepfather as if he were nothing more than an insect she was about to crush. You honestly think a delivery driver can be bribed to enter my estate, Arthur? Scarlett asked, her voice dangerously calm as she stepped into the room. My security team has been tracking your car since you crossed the county line. I allowed you inside. I wanted to see exactly how much your pathetic life was worth to you. Arthur turned completely pale, stumbling backward. Scarlett didn't even give him another glance. She turned to her head enforcer. Marcus, take the paperwork out of his coat and then take him down to the holding rooms beneath the casino. He and I are going to have a very long conversation about extortion. Ava, help me. Tell her to stop. I'm your family. Arthur screamed as Marcus grabbed him by the collar, dragging him out of the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't shed a single tear. I just watched him go, completely disowning the toxic past that had held me captive for so long. The heavy doors slammed shut, leaving the room dead silent. Scarlett immediately rushed over to me, her hands snapping to my shoulders, her green eyes scanning my face with frantic, overwhelming concern. Ava, did he touch you? Did he hurt you? Tell me. I'm fine, Scarlett. He didn't touch me. Good. Scarlett said, her jaw clenching tightly. The fury was still rolling off her in waves, her eyes fixed on the door where Arthur had just been dragged out. She let go of my shoulders, turning her back to me as she adjusted her suit jacket. "Stay here, Ava. I have a syndicate to run and a debt to collect. I'll be back before dinner." She took a sharp step toward the door, ready to leave, ready to put business and retribution before everything else. But I wasn't going to let her walk away, not this time. Before she could take another step, I lunged forward, grabbing the lapels of her sharp suit jacket. With a sudden wave of adrenaline, I forcefully pulled the Mafia Queen backward and down, slamming my mouth against hers. In all the romance novels I ever sold, writers always describe a first kiss with metaphors. They talk about fireworks exploding, or stars aligning, or the world suddenly making perfect sense. But when my lips finally met Scarlett King's, there were no metaphors. There was only a devastating, white-hot reality. It was the feeling of her gasp against my mouth, a sharp, ragged intake of breath as the absolute shock of my actions registered in her mind. It was the frantic, desperate way her hands instantly moved from my shoulders to the sides of my face, her long fingers tangling into my hair with a fierce, possessive grip. She didn't pull away. She didn't hesitate. The heavy restraint she had been practicing for weeks completely snapped, scattering like ash in the wind. Scarlett pulled me flush against her body, her powerful frame pressing me back against the edge of the large marble fireplace mantel. The heat radiating off her was intoxicating, a scorching contrast to the cold rain beating against the windows outside. I let out a soft, helpless hum against her lips, my hand sliding up from her lapels to wrap tightly around the back of her neck, pulling her down even closer. This wasn't a gentle, tentative first kiss. This was a collision of weeks of unsaid words, near misses, and a heavy, breathless tension that had driven us both completely insane. Scarlett kissed me like a woman starving, her lips moving over mine with a deep, consuming hunger that stole the breath straight from my lungs. Every single nerve ending in my body ignited, a heavy, exquisite ache blooming deep in my chest. She shifted her weight, her thigh sliding between mine, anchoring me to her as her mouth grew sweeter, deeper, completely devouring me. The faint, addictive taste of dark vanilla and rich whiskey lingered on her tongue, filling my senses until my mind went entirely blank. I couldn't think about my stepfather. I couldn't think about the Mafia Council, or the rival families, or the danger lurking outside the estate gates. Nothing existed in the entire universe except the bruising, passionate pressure of Scarlett's lips against mine and the frantic, violent rhythm of her heart slamming against her ribs. Finally pulled back a fraction of an inch, she didn't let me go. Her forehead rested against mine, both of our breaths coming in short, ragged, uneven gasps. Her eyes were still tightly shut, her eyelashes fluttering as she fought to catch her breath. Her grip on my waist was so tight, so unyielding, it felt as though she were trying to fuse our souls together. "Ava." Her voice was completely wrecked. It was a low, gravelly whisper, stripped entirely of our usual cold, authoritative armor. She slowly opened her eyes, and the sheer depth of emotion swirling in those dark, rust-green depths made my knees physically tremble. There was an ocean of vulnerability in her gaze, a raw, terrifying devotion that she was laying entirely at my feet. "You have no idea what you just did to me. If this is a dream, Ava, I will slaughter anyone who tries to wake me up." "It's not a dream, Scarlett. I'm right here, and I'm not running away anymore." A small, breathless smile touched the corner of her lips, a sight so rare and beautiful it made my chest ache. She reached up, her thumb gently brushing across my bottom lip, which was swollen and still burning with the phantom heat of her touch. She leaned down again, pressing a soft, lingering, achingly tender kiss to the corner of my mouth, then to my jaw, before burying her face into the crook of my neck. I wrapped my arms securely around her shoulders, holding the feared Mafia Queen of Seattle tight against my chest as she breathed me in. We were standing in the center of a criminal empire, surrounded by guns, secrets, and an impending war. But as I felt Scarlett's lips press a quiet, worshipful kiss against my collarbone, I knew the absolute truth. I didn't care about the chaos. I didn't care about the danger. I had finally found the one person who chose me, and I would cross through hell itself to stay by her side. The problem with finding your paradise in the middle of a war zone is that the outside world doesn't care about your happiness. It just sees a new vulnerability to exploit. The 3 days following our first kiss were the most beautiful, terrifying days of my life. Scarlett treated me like a woman she had finally won, possessive, fiercely attentive, and completely unbothered by the chaos of her syndicate. But the peace couldn't last. My stepfather's desperate attempt to blackmail us had left a paper trail, and the rival family from Portland, the ones who sent the sniper, finally figured out exactly who I was to the Queen of Seattle. They didn't see an oath to a dead nurse. They saw a weakness. They saw a target. It was midnight when the crisis peaked. I was sitting on the leather sofa in Scarlett's private war room, a cold cup of tea in my hands. The room was suffocatingly tense. Marcus and the top captains of the King Syndicate were standing around the massive glass table, their faces grim under the harsh overhead lights. Scarlett stood at the head of the table, her charcoal blazer unbuttoned, her arms crossed as she stared down at a secure satellite phone buzzing on the glass. Marcus reached out and hit the speaker button. A cold, raspy voice filled the room. Don Vance, the ruthless head of the Portland rival family. "Good evening, Queen Scarlett. I trust your ribs are healing nicely after our little meeting in Portland." Scarlett didn't blink. Her expression was a mask of pure, frozen stone, her green eyes narrowing into lethal slits. "You have exactly 30 seconds to tell me why you called my secure line, Vance, before I send a team to turn your casinos into a smoking crater." "Let's skip the posturing, Scarlett. We know about the girl. We know about Ava Parker. We know she's the daughter of the woman who pulled you out of that fire 15 years ago. And we know she's currently sleeping in your bed." My grip tightened around my teacup until my knuckles turned entirely white. Marcus and the other captains immediately shifted, their eyes darting to me with sudden, intense worry. "The Syndicate Council is already furious with you for disrupting the southern shipping routes. My proposition is simple, Queenie. Give us the girl. Hand Ava Parker over to my enforcers by tomorrow morning as a token of your submission, and we will sign the peace treaty. The war ends before it even starts. Your shipping routes stay intact. Your crown stays secure. And if I refuse? If you refuse, we launch a full-scale assault on Seattle. Every warehouse you own burns. Every captain you trust gets hunted. We will tear your city apart piece by piece, and we will take her anyway. Choose wisely, Scarlett. Is one little bookstore girl worth a multi-million-dollar war?" The line went completely dead. Silence descended on the room, so thick and heavy it felt like physical weight. One of the older captains, a gray-haired man named Thomas, cleared his throat hesitantly, stepping forward. "Boss, Vance is right. The council won't back us on an open war for a civilian. If we fight the Portland family over Arthur Parker's stepdaughter, the other syndicates will see it as a massive liability. They'll think you're letting your emotions destroy the business. For the sake of the family, we have to consider the exchange." My heart dropped into my stomach. I looked down at the floor, a familiar cold ache blooming in my chest. There it is, I thought. The moment I become a burden again, the moment I get traded away to save someone else. I stood up slowly, preparing myself to tell Scarlett to let me go, to protect her people. But before I could even open my mouth, a terrifying sound echoed through the room. Scarlett slammed her hand onto the glass table, the violent impact rattling the computer monitors. She didn't just look angry, she looked like a demon dragged straight out of hell. She slowly turned her gaze to Thomas, her voice dropping to a low, lethal hiss that made every grown man in that room visibly flinch. "If any of you mentions handing Ava over to my enemies ever again, I will personally put a bullet between your eyes before the sun comes up." "Boss, please, I'm just looking at the financials. I don't give a damn about the financials. I am the queen of this city. I built this empire with my own bare hands, and I did not build it so a parasitic rat like Vance could dictate who stays under my roof. Ava Parker stays with me. If Vance wants a war, tell our men to load their weapons, because I am going to burn Portland to absolute ash." The captains instantly bowed their heads, terrified into absolute submission. "Clear the room. All of you. Out. Within 5 seconds, the war room was completely empty, the heavy doors clicking shut. Scarlett stood at the head of the table, her chest heaving as she tried to control the sheer violent fury rolling off her in waves. I walked over to her slowly, my sneakers making no sound on the floor. I reached out, my fingers gently brushing against her arm. The moment my skin touched hers, the tension in her shoulders broke. She turned around instantly, her arms wrapping around my waist, pulling me so tight against her chest I could feel the frantic, wild rhythm of her heart. Scarlett, they think you're insane. They think you're destroying your empire for me. Scarlett pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. She reached up, her warm hands cupping my face, her green eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding devotion that completely stole my breath away. Let them think I'm insane, Ava. I spent 15 years building this throne because I thought power was the only thing that could keep me alive. But I was wrong. Power is nothing without you. I would rather watch this entire city burn to the ground than let them take you away from me. She leaned down, pressing a fierce, possessive, desperate kiss against my lips, a silent promise that she would fight the whole world to keep me. But as I held her tight, a cold, sickening dread washed over me. Scarlett was ready for a war. That wasn't what worried me. What worried me was that our enemies had finally figured out something I learned weeks ago. Scarlett King would burn down a city for me, and people like Vance were exactly cruel enough to use that against her. In the stories I used to sell, the darkest hour always arrives just after the characters think they've won. You get a single moment of perfect, breathless peace, and then the trap snaps shut around you before you can even scream. The gang war Vance threatened didn't start with an army on our doorstep. It started with a whisper. It had been less than 24 hours since Scarlett defied her own Mafia council to protect me. The King estate was placed on maximum lockdown with double the guards and security snipers lining the perimeter. Scarlett was exhausted, spending every waking hour coordinating defensive strategies with Marcus. I couldn't bear to watch her carry the weight of the world alone, so at 10 p.m., I decided to walk down to the mansion's private medical bay to grab her some strong sleep aids. I thought I was safe inside the fortress. I was entirely wrong. The medical hallway was dimly lit and completely silent. As I reached for the door handle, a sudden heavy metallic click echoed from the security panel on the wall. The bright overhead lights instantly flickered, dying out completely and plunging the entire corridor into a suffocating, pitch-black darkness. My heart violently leaped into my throat. The emergency red backup lights hummed to life, casting an eerie, blood-colored glow over the concrete walls. Before I could even turn around to run, the heavy steel security doors at the end of the hall were violently blown off their hinges with a deafening blast. 3 men wearing heavy tactical gear and night vision goggles charged through the smoke. They weren't fighting the mansion guards. The security grid had been hacked from the inside. Marcus, Scarlett, I screamed their names at the top of my lungs, turning on my heel and sprinting down the dark corridor. But I was a bookstore employee, not an assassin. Within 3 strides, a heavy gloved hand slammed over my mouth, cutting off my air, while another arm wrapped like an iron vise around my waist, lifting my feet completely off the floor. I fought with everything I had. I bit down on the leather glove until I tasted copper, kicking my legs and slamming my elbows into the attacker's ribs. I wasn't the crying, submissive hostage they expected. I was furious. Subdue her. The boss needs her alive. Move, move, move. A sharp, biting needle pierced the side of my neck. A wave of icy, paralyzing numbness immediately flooded my veins. My limbs went completely heavy, my vision fracturing into blurry streaks of red and black. As they dragged my collapsing body through the shattered exit door, the last thing I heard through the mansion's radio comms was Scarlett's frantic, echoing voice screaming over the security speakers. Ava! Ava, answer me! Where is she? And then everything went entirely black. My limbs went completely heavy, my vision fracturing into blurry streaks of red and black. As they dragged my collapsing body through the shattered exit door, the last thing I heard through the mansion's radio comms was Scarlett's frantic, echoing voice screaming over the security speakers, begging me to answer her. And then, everything went entirely black. Back at the mansion, the gentle, quiet world died the moment the security grid failed. When Scarlett reached the shattered medical wing and saw nothing but empty bullet casings, a broken teacup, and a drop of Ava's blood on the floor, the last remaining piece of her humanity died. The sophisticated, tailored suit she wore meant absolutely nothing. Her wealth meant nothing. Her home had been violated. Her woman had been stolen. "Marcus," Scarlett said, her voice dropping to a low, guttural growl that made the towering head enforcer step back in genuine fear. Marcus stammered, explaining that they found the mole, an old captain named Thomas who gave away the bypass codes to stop the war. He told her Thomas was locked in the basement, but Scarlett didn't care about the basement. "Break his fingers until he gives you the exact coordinates of where they took her," Scarlett ordered coldly. "And then, call every single soldier on our payroll from Seattle to the Canadian border." Marcus warned her that mobilizing over 500 men would start a national syndicate war and cause them to lose everything. But Scarlett didn't hesitate. She ripped a heavy assault rifle off the armory rack, locking the magazine into place with a violent metallic slam. Turning to her men with bloodshot, dead green eyes, she told them that if the enemy thought Ava was her weakness, she was about to show them that Ava was the only reason she was keeping the rest of the world alive. "Load the vehicles," Scarlett commanded. "We are going to burn Portland to the ground." The first hour wasn't so bad. My mind was still fuzzy from the sedative they had injected into my neck, and the adrenaline was pumping too hard for me to think clearly. I sat tied to a heavy wooden chair beneath a single, flickering overhead light, telling myself that Scarlett always had a plan. She was the Queen of Seattle. She would map out the logistics, and she would come through that door. The second hour was harder. The cold dampness of the abandoned warehouse started seeping through my clothes, making my skin shiver. So it's suffocating, broken only by the steady, mocking footsteps of Don Vance pacing back and forth in front of me. By the third hour, I stopped looking at the door every time footsteps approached. Doubt didn't creep in because I believed Scarlett didn't care about me. It crept in because I finally understood exactly what rescuing me would cost her. To come here, she would have to defy her own mafia council. She would have to risk her entire multi-million-dollar shipping empire. She would have to start an open, bloody syndicate war on rival territory. The drive from Seattle to Portland felt like an eternity. A blur of rain, flashing headlights, and a suffocating, heavy silence. Scarlett sat in the back of the armored vehicle, her fingers gripped so tightly around the handles of her security tablet that her knuckles were completely white. Every second Ava was in the hands of her enemies felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She didn't look like a corporate queen anymore. She looked like a force of nature, entirely focused on one singular goal, bringing Ava home. Marcus managed to track the tracking device hidden in the lining of Ava's original sweater, tracing the signal to an abandoned, heavily guarded industrial warehouse on the outskirts of the city. And as the minutes ticked by, the old dark voice in the back of my mind whispered the same cruel reminder I had carried my whole life. You are an introverted bookstore employee. You are a civilian burden. Nobody destroys an empire for a girl like you. Don Vance stopped his pacing, stopping directly in front of my chair. A smug, cruel grin stretched across his face as he looked down at me. He didn't touch me physically, but he didn't need to. He knew exactly where to aim his words. "Do you know what's happening right now back in Seattle, Ava?" Vance asked, his voice dripping with venomous amusement. "Your precious queen is choosing her empire. She's choosing her council. She's choosing survival." I didn't answer him. I kept my chin lifted, staring straight ahead, but my heart fractured into a million pieces inside my chest. For the first time since I woke up tied to that chair, I was scared she wouldn't come. I was terrified that, just like Arthur and just like Leo, the person I finally trusted was going to leave me behind. "She isn't coming," Vance whispered, leaning down to my eye level. "Seattle is 6 hours away. Do you really think a woman like Scarlett King starts wars over a bookstore employee? You're just a favor to a dead nurse, sweetheart. You're completely irrelevant." I squeezed my eyes shut, a suffocating, heavy ache crushing my lungs. I didn't cry. Trust me, I was crying inside of me. I didn't scream. I just braced myself for the absolute certainty of being abandoned yet again. And then the warehouse doors exploded. A sudden, blinding white light and a deafening, disorienting roar filled the expansive room as tactical flashbangs detonated across the entrance. Chaos erupted instantly. Smoke rolled over the concrete floors, and within seconds, Vance's enforcers were completely disarmed, forced to the ground by an elite, highly coordinated security detail. It wasn't a messy shootout. It was a cold, calculated, total shutdown. Vance stumbled backward in pure panic, pulling a small weapon from his jacket. But he stopped smiling. Every ounce of color drained from his face as a figure stepped through the swirling smoke. Scarlett didn't run. She didn't shout. She just walked. Her long black wool coat billowed behind her, and her green eyes were entirely dark, practically glowing with a lethal, terrifying authority that made the entire room freeze. She closed the distance between them in 3 slow, deliberate strides, effortlessly slapping the weapon out of Vance's hand and pinning him forcefully against a stack of shipping crates. "You started a war over one woman," Vance gasped, his voice trembling as he stared into the face of his own ruin. Scarlett didn't raise her voice. She leaned in close, her tone a low, icy hiss that made the air itself feel freezing. "No," Scarlett whispered. "You started a war when you touched her." She gave Marcus a single, sharp nod, and the head enforcer instantly dragged Vance away into the darkness, leaving the warehouse dead silent. The terrifying, untouchable Mafia Don completely vanished the second Scarlett turned toward the flickering light. Her face went deathly pale. She sprinted across the concrete floor, dropping heavily to her knees right in front of my chair. Her hands were shaking violently, not out of fear, but out of sheer, overwhelming relief, as she pulled a tactical knife from her vest and cleanly sliced through the plastic ties binding my wrists. Once my hands were free, Scarlett didn't immediately pull me into a hug. She just sat there on her knees, staring at me. Her trembling hands moved to my face, gently tilting my head side to side, her green eyes frantically checking my wrists, my neck, my face. She was studying me, making sure I was real, making sure I wasn't a mirage. "Ava," Scarlett breathed, her voice completely breaking, stripped of every ounce of her criminal armor. "Are you hurt? Tell me, are you hurt?" I looked into her eyes, seeing the raw, unhinged devotion staring back at me. The dark, doubtful voices in my head vanished forever. "You came," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion so heavy it physically hurt. "Of course I came," Scarlett said, her thumbs gently brushing the dust off my cheeks. "No," I whispered, shaking my head as the final pieces of my oldest wound completely healed. "You really came." Scarlett didn't answer with words. She simply surged forward, her powerful arms wrapping tightly around my waist, pulling me off the chair and flush against her chest. She buried her face into the crook of my neck, breathing me in with a desperate, ragged intensity. I wrapped my arms securely around her neck, holding her just as tightly, feeling the violent, frantic rhythm of her heart slamming against my ribs. "Ava," Scarlett murmured against my skin, her voice thick and raw. "Look at me, it's over, you're going home." For the first time since I woke up tied to that chair, I stopped counting all the ways things could go wrong. Scarlett was here. Somehow that felt stronger than locked doors, security teams, and bulletproof glass. All my life people left. My mother died. Arthur traded me away. Leo never looked back. I spent years convincing myself that was normal. I spent my whole life believing that I was just someone who was hard to love, and even harder to choose. But as Scarlett held me in the dark warehouse, refusing to let me go, I finally understood the truth. Turns out I wasn't hard to choose. I was just surrounded by people who never should have had the choice. They say that the quiet after a storm is the most peaceful sound in the world. But for me, the true peace didn't come from the silence. It came from the steady, rhythmic sound of Scarlett King's heartbeat beneath my ear every single morning. A full year had passed since the night the Portland syndicate tried to use me to tear down the King Empire. The fallout from that night had completely reshaped the underworld. My stepfather, Arthur, and my stepbrother, Leo, were long gone, legally handled by the authorities and stripped of every asset they ever stole. The corrupt Mafia Council had been completely dismantled, and Scarlett had solidified her rule over the Pacific Northwest with absolute, undisputed authority. But our lives didn't center around the syndicate anymore, because Scarlett kept her promise to me. She didn't let the shadows of her world swallow up the light we had found together. Instead, she helped me build a world of our own. Today was the grand opening of the Paper and Willow Cafe, a beautiful 2-story bookstore and espresso shop nestled right in the heart of downtown Seattle. The space was exactly what I had always dreamed of. Exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling oak shelves packed with thousands of classic romance novels, and the rich, comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filling the air. Scarlett had funded the entire project, but true to her word, she hadn't taken it over. She had stepped back, letting me design every single detail, allowing me to finally build something that was completely, entirely mine. By 9 p.m., the grand opening crowd had finally cleared out. The heavy glass front doors were locked, the warm, ambient fairy lights casting a soft, golden glow over the quiet rows of books. I was standing behind the polished marble counter, wiping down the espresso machine with a contented smile on my face. When the brass bell above the door chimed softly, I looked up, a familiar, exquisite heat blooming in my chest. Scarlett stepped into the cafe, shutting her long black wool coat and draping it over a nearby armchair. She wore a stunning emerald green silk blouse that matched the exact color of her eyes, her dark hair cascading perfectly over her shoulders. She looked impossibly beautiful, her sharp, authoritative posture softening the absolute second her gaze locked onto mine. She walked over to the counter, her leather boots making a slow, deliberate sound on the hardwood floor. She didn't say a word. She simply reached across the marble, her long, elegant fingers gently catching my chin, tilting my face up to meet hers as she leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering, incredibly sweet kiss against my lips. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Scarlett murmured against my mouth, her low, gravelly voice sending a delightful shiver straight down my spine. "Your dream is officially a reality." "Thank you," I whispered, my hands coming up to rest gently over hers, savoring the intense, radiating warmth of her skin. Though I noticed a lot of terrifying men in tailored black suits buying lavender lattes today. "Did you force your entire security detail to attend my opening?" Scarlett let out a low, rich chuckle, her green eyes dancing with that familiar, deeply amused glint. She slid around the counter, closing the distance between us until her chest was pressed lightly against my back, her powerful arms wrapping securely around my waist. She pulled me close, burying her face into the crook of my neck, breathing me in. "Marcus insisted he genuinely enjoys lavender," Scarlett teased, her warm breath fanning across my skin. "But yes, I may have mentioned that anyone who didn't buy at least 3 books today would be reassigned to the Midnight Docks Patrol." I laughed, leaning back against her, completely melting into her embrace. I turned my head slightly, looking up at her sharp, beautiful side profile, the twinkling city lights from the window reflecting in her eyes. We didn't go back to the estate right away. Instead, the lights were low, the city outside was quiet, and Scarlett and I were sitting right on the hardwood floor among stacks of unbound books. There were no bodyguards in the room. There was no war, no corporate suits, and no looming enemies. It was just the two of us existing in a space that felt entirely safe. I looked over at her. Scarlett had shed her heavy velvet jacket, sitting in her emerald green silk blouse with her sleeves rolled up, her dark hair falling softly over her shoulders. She looked impossibly beautiful, her sharp posture completely relaxed as she leaned her back against a row of fiction novels. I looked down at my hands, a question I had been carrying in the dark corners of my heart for an entire year finally rising to my lips. It was something I had been too afraid to ask until now. "Scarlett?" I asked softly, my voice cutting through the quiet of the bookstore. "Always, sweetheart," Scarlett murmured, turning her sharp green eyes toward me, her expression instantly melting into something incredibly tender. "Can I ask you something, honestly?" "Anything." I swallowed hard, looking at the books surrounding us. What would have happened if Arthur never gave me away that night? If Leo had never stolen the drugs and my stepfather never dragged me to that garage at 3 in the morning? What would you have done? Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. It wasn't because she didn't know the answer. It was because she did. She looked down at our intertwined hands on the floor, her long fingers gently tracing the lines of my palm. I used to think about that a lot, Scarlett confessed, her low, gravelly voice carrying a heavy, quiet weight. I looked up, meeting her gaze. You did! She smiled softly, a look of rare, agonizing vulnerability crossing her face. Whether I should have just knocked on your bookstore door, whether I should have introduced myself, whether I should have just sat down at a table, ordered a coffee, and told you the truth about your mother. What stopped you? I whispered. Scarlett's thumb brushed gently against mine, her grip tightening just a fraction. You seemed happy, Ava. From a distance, watching your life through the security reports, I thought maybe you had a quiet, normal existence, a life untouched by the blood and violence of my world. And as much as I wanted to bring you home, I didn't want to be the reason your peace fell apart. My chest tightened, a beautiful, overwhelming warmth flooding my lungs. I was absolutely not happy, Scarlett. Arthur was a monster, and Leo was a disaster. I know that now, Scarlett murmured, a dark, dangerous glint flickering in her eyes for a split second before it vanished, replaced by an ocean of devotion. She leaned forward, closing the distance between us on the floor until her face was inches from mine. But then Arthur gave you away. I let out a soft, breathless laugh. He did. Scarlett smiled, the genuine, radiant smile that she only ever saved for me. A woman feared across the entire country, a queen who held the fate of a city in her hands, yet the look she gave me right then was softer than anything else in existence. Yes, Scarlett whispered, her breath hot against my lips as she reached up to gently cut my face. Arthur gave you away, and then I got lucky. She leaned in the final inch, pressing her forehead gently against mine, holding me as if I were the most precious treasure she had ever conquered. She didn't force a passionate kiss. She just held me there, breathing me in, letting the absolute certainty of her presence anchor me to the earth. All my life, I thought being unwanted was something I had done wrong. I spent years convincing myself that maybe I wasn't smart enough, or pretty enough, or important enough to keep. I thought that if I just tried harder, or shrank myself down smaller, people would finally choose to stay. But as I sat on the floor of my own bookstore, wrapped securely in the arms of the most dangerous woman in Seattle, I finally understood something. The problem was never me. I was just asking the wrong people to choose me. Scarlett chose me. She chose me in that garage. She chose me in the garden. She chose me in the middle of a multi-million-dollar gang war, and she chose me again and again and again, every single day. Turns out love isn't finding someone who needs you to fill a void. It's finding someone who sees every single broken, defensive piece of your soul. And stays anyway. 1 year ago, my family gave me away at 3 a.m. to settle a criminal debt. Funny enough, that was the night I finally found where I belonged. The end. And that's a wrap on today's story. I hope it got you. I hope you laughed. I hope you felt something. Because that's exactly why we're here. If you have a favorite moment, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're new to GL Yuri Tales, welcome. You found your people. We drop brand new original GL stories every week. So, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story. Before you go, I have something special to share. Channel memberships are now open. If you're enjoying these stories and want even more content, consider joining the channel. Members get early access to new videos, exclusive perks, custom stickers and badges, and special members-only content you won't find anywhere else. Your support helps me create more stories and bring even bigger projects to life. So if you'd like to support the channel and unlock some awesome extras, click the join button and become part of our members family today. Thank you so much for watching. It genuinely means everything. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, the best love stories are always the complicated ones. See you soon.